Hello, friends. If you ever find yourself in the position, as I did in Christmas 2018, of having to lose 200 pounds or more, what you need isn't a new diet. What you need isn't a workout plan. What you need is probably to change your whole life. Or at least that's what I had to do. Over the last 4 years, I have refactored my whole life and lost over 200 pounds. I've gone from being someone who is fat and sick and in pain most of the time to someone who is a little less fat. Let's be honest, I still have work to do, but much less sick. And far from being in pain, I feel able and am willing part of the human race with motivation and a direction in my life. I'm going to tell you, as best as I can remember it, the story of the last 4 years, the key moments that helped me change my life and make progress on the horrifying goal of dealing with a 600-pound body and a truckload of pain. And it all started with a trip to the emergency room. I found myself back there dealing with a health problem that just kept on coming back. As my weight climbed and climbed, this problem just got worse and worse, and I found myself increasingly going back to urgent care, going back to the emergency room, ended up getting admitted into the hospital, being on IV antibiotics. A scary experience, but I didn't know how to systematically get on top of it. The specter of trying to correct this problem was too huge. Because you see, what you need when you're that weight, when you're 600 pounds or more, when you need to lose so much weight, is you don't need a diet. You don't need a workout plan. What you need is to change your life. And yes, diets and workout plans fold into that life change. But man, you need to do a lot of work. And I know I certainly did. So during this particular trip to the hospital, I think that my wife got a chance to see what life was going to look like without me. And make no mistake, if I didn't make a change, she was going to find out what that looked like permanently before too many years. Um, I was, as I've said before, eating myself into an early grave. And I think out of a sense of desperation at this, my wife folded me into a plan she was working on for herself. What she was doing in her own life, on her own initiative, unrelated to me, was taking on a ketogenic diet. She was going to try it for her own. She was recommended it to deal with some problems she was dealing with. She said, "Please do this keto diet with me, Greg, please." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it." I was on antibiotics. I was probably half asleep, but I said, "Yes, I'll do it." You see, in the past, I'd taken these offers of help from her and from others and sort of turned my nose at them. I think convincing myself that I should know better and I should be able to do these good things for myself, while letting go of the fact that in the past I hadn't. Um, I knew that I should be able to do these things. I knew the people that I compared myself into life were able to, and I didn't know why I couldn't do what they could do. But regardless, this time I decided to accept the help. And man, am I glad I did, because keto taught me a lot and it did wonders for me. A few of the key outcomes. First, I learned what my body liked. Meat. Meat. I love some meat. And vegetables. I learned to like vegetables and the feeling they have when you put them together, especially for me when I don't mix it in with dairy or cheese. Something about the combination of meat and cheese makes my stomach go, ugh. And I figured that out during this time. I started figuring out what I needed to eat for lunches. I started figuring out what I needed to eat for breakfasts in order to feel energized and get through my day in a clear-headed way. And what a game changer that was. This break, though, this like complete vacation from my other prior life where I was filling myself with junk all hours of the clock, helped me understand this in a way that I couldn't before because I accepted that help. So I carried forward with that from this keto experience a breakfast habit that I still follow 4 years later and a lunch habit that I still follow 4 years later, and were significant contributors in helping me shed the 200 plus pounds on the way to where I am today. Huge. Another huge takeaway from this experience: accepting the help. This was like something I had no other ideas of what to do. I didn't feel excited about keto. I didn't really want to. I felt kind of almost like I had no other option. Um, but accepting the help, this experience showed me that it was possible to accept the help and get something you never could have anticipated. It also suggested to me that there were opportunities to accept help before things got truly dire. You would see that unfold in the future. And the very last outcome, and actually the one that was the most important at that time, was pain. You see, when I was at my highest weight, one of the biggest problems I had, one of the largest obstacles to actually gaining ground on it, was every single second I was on my feet, I was in intense physical pain. And when I was off my feet, I was in intense emotional pain and anticipating that physical pain when I did have to get up to go do this, that, or the other thing. A grocery store trip was murder to me. Oh my God, the lengths that I went to mitigate that pain during those years. But this diet, it took enough weight off my back to take that pain level from like an 8 to like a 4. And that was enough. That was enough so that I can be on my feet for a few minutes at a time. That was enough so that I could make myself go on walks to the grocery store on the corner, taking little breaks on benches or whatever else I can find to sit on along the way and be okay. Before that, I couldn't even make it to the bench. This little bit of help got me just a little further and out of pain to a point where I could do things I couldn't before. And the amount of emotional turmoil I was in anticipating that pain also got reduced. I can't underestimate how huge this gift was. And even though my wife figured out that keto wasn't for her and I lost my keto cook and I ended up going off the habit, I got so much out of this time. And it led to incredible things. What incredible things, you ask? Well, this very video, of course. No, the story I want to talk about here is actually about the origin of the Deeg podcast. In 2019, during this time where things were getting a little easier for me and I could think a little more clear headedly and I had a little more energy, I started examining my gaming habit. I really, let's be honest, gaming addiction. I was gaming all night, every night. When I was getting through my workday, I was thinking about gaming. I was planning about gaming. I was obsessing about gaming, watching creators and thinking, man, I could do that better than they do. And I was just doing nothing about it. But this little bit of energy was enough for me to be like, I need to channel this interest. I need to elevate this fascination with gaming worlds, figure out what it's about, and do something with it. I happened to have a conversation with a good buddy of mine that, for whatever reason, got recorded because I think we were testing out some kind of streaming thing. But in any case, I ended up listening back to this conversation where we talked about life and games and a bunch of things. And I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, this conversation is like listenable. This is something. I should do something with this. A few months later, I put it together. I got that friend plus another and started the Deeg podcast. The very first episode we did in January 2020 was about reviewing the last 10 years of gaming and our sort of top games. I remember waxing eloquently about Skyrim. And man, shout out to my boys Taylor and Matt for jumping on the train with me at the time. It didn't last that long, but oh man, the podcast turned into bigger things. I'm going to say more about this later, potentially, I think. But the important thing to say about this is getting into the podcast. What it did was it gave me a structure and an avenue for exploring my interests in a way that I'd never had before. It was the very first baby steps of making my own meaning in life that was determined by me, not by some list of achievements, not by some boss who had stuff for me to do, not by some teacher handing me homework, not by some dietitian giving me a plan to follow. I chose this. I created something that never existed before. And that feeling led to more and more. During that same time, in 2020, so rollover from 19 into 2020, the pandemic happened. And a funny thing occurred where an old gaming community I'd been a part of 20 years ago came back and we relived some of our glory days. This is the Team Fortress Classic scene that I've talked about in other discussions. And I got involved. I ran a team. I would stream the matches. I ended up casting the matches. This was my very first casting experience. And that got me into streaming. And that ends up being much more important later on. I'm not going to tell that whole story here. There's a whole other discussion we got to do about the evolution of the podcast and my content and what it meant to me. But for the purposes of this discussion, the absence of pain opened up room in my life for self determined meaning. And this was immensely important because it gave me something to think about that wasn't food and that I had control over. What a game changer. And then along came a diagnosis. I learned that I had ADHD. Not believing it at first, I did my own research, and what I found shocked me and helped me explain what I felt like was my whole life. And most saliently for this discussion, it helped me understand so many of the things I could improve with my relationship with food. One of those things was changing the things that were around me, changing the structure of my life to support the best of my intentions. It meant getting rid of all the crap food that I was keeping around. I'm talking about the cookies, I'm talking about the brownies, I'm talking about the potato chips, leftover pizza. So, because here's the story I would always tell myself with this stuff is like, okay, I'm going to eat good and I'm going to reward myself with this and I'll parcel this out over the week or the month or whatever. But in practice, I never parceled these things out. I just obliterated them. Box of cookies, gone. Bag of potato chips, gone. Box of pizza, gone. I had no restraint when it came to certain kinds of food. And examining ADHD and thinking about it got me to take the step of actually taking that stuff out of the place where I spent all my time, which was my house, because I worked from home and my hobby was from home, and there was a global pandemic going around. Um, that was huge for me and getting this weight lost. Another thing that happened during this time, sort of unrelated, but I think thematically consistent, is my wife suggested that the two of us suggest our grocery habits. Up till now, essentially, we had all kind of done our grocery shopping together. We shared a lot of food. She was the only cook in the house, but I would help prepare things too, and we'd eat together a lot. What I think this led to is a situation where two people who were both struggling with their weight, two people who were both struggling with food choices, found ourselves always sort of inadvertently triggering the other person. Think about it this way. Let's say you have two people who have triggers that cause them to make bad food choices, okay? 100% and 100%. Let's say each of those person has 60% overlap of triggers with the other person. So for me, 60% of my food triggers are the same as my wife's, and 40% are different. Same for her. What that means when the two of us are living in the same house and sharing food is that each of us functionally have 140% of the food triggers we normally would have. And it just makes it so much more difficult to make good choices when you're also subject to the bad choices of the person you make a life with. Separating that out helped get this down to 100%, and it really made things a lot more sane for both of us. It meant that rather than eating whatever my wife prepared and she thought that I would like and was the right portion size and would be good for her and all the math and science that goes into making food, I just bought my own stuff. And because I didn't want to cook, I bought pre-portioned meals. And just like that, I had portion control in my dinners in a way that I never really had before. And that was a huge contribution to this change. By this point, I probably weighed in the lowish 500s, I would guess, after these good changes. But this train was just getting started. The next stop was in a parking garage. Let me explain this. So, I love podcasts. That's probably why I made one. And one of the ones that I listened to during this time, this would have been in 2021, the second year of the pandemic. One of the ones I was listening to suggested that in order to sleep well, what one of the key ingredients was at least 150 minutes of activity every single week. At this time, I was still sedentary, not really doing anything, just kind of focusing on food. And I was having trouble with my sleep. On days where I slept badly, I would do bad work. I would have trouble making good food decisions. I would be short with people. I just was not a good version of myself. And I knew that somehow I knew that improving my sleep would make the rest of my life just that much better. I thought to myself, 150 minutes? I can do that. That's like less than 25 minutes a day. So let's get out there. I used the fact that I was no longer in crushing pain to get out. I'd already been walking to and from the grocery store, making stops along the way. Now, this was sort of an imperfect walking route because, well, weather exists, because it was actually on a fairly steep hill. And a lot of times I just didn't want to be seen by people. Okay. I was a huge fat dude. I didn't always love being on display. And one day the rain was coming down so hard that when I got to the front door and saw it and realized that I wasn't going to be able to go for my walk, I felt just so frustrated. I decided right then and there that I was just going to walk around the damn parking garage of the apartment complex that I lived in. And that's what I did. And what I ended up finding was actually a level ground, no rain, very few people environment to go on walks every single day that was about a minute and a half from my front door. And that's what I did. I started going on those walks. And since that day in 2021, I've gone out for a walk almost every single day of my life. These walks are not heroic in their intensity, they're not heroic in their length, they're not heroic in their destination, they're not sexy, they're boring. But what they are is impressive in their consistency. This underlines the power of doing something every single day. And even though I don't get a lot of calories burnt from these walks, I have learned to appreciate so much the um just the chance to be in your body for 30 minutes a day, meeting with the neighbors. Since then, I've also moved away from that apartment to a place across town. I no longer have a parking garage, I have a cul-de-sac. But I've been outside and enjoying the actual sunlight in my eyes, enjoying the wind, the sounds of the neighbors, the cars, the life, the everything. It makes me feel like I'm part of the human race again. It improves my sleep. It improves my mood. It helps me think. I stopped listening to music on these walks and started just going as is so I can think clearly. I crave these walks every single day. I don't get time for them. And they've just been such a huge positive impactor on losing these 200 pounds. And I want to encourage people who are having a hard time getting started with being physically active is don't try to do something super impressive and sexy. Like, yeah, maybe prove to yourself you can do something like that. If you can hit a heavy bag, or you can go on a run on a treadmill, or you can lift the heavy weights. Those are all good things to do. But every day, a small thing every day, in my experience, will always add up higher than something sexy and impressive whenever you're motivated. Every single day. The last domino to fall when it came to establishing the habits that got me to lose the 200 pounds to change my life actually was streaming. If you can believe that. In early 2022, I'd made the switch from Twitch over to YouTube and started taking streaming a little more seriously, poking at it. And I realized that on the nights where I streamed at night, I didn't have trouble with binge eating. You see, the evenings had always been the time of greatest peril for me. Even though I'd done a good job of getting temptation out of the house, there was always something that I could figure out when the nighttime came, when the cravings went up, when the wolf in my stomach started to howl. And I never knew that what I needed all along wasn't to focus on not doing that, but to find something else to fill that time with that gave me much more than food ever could. And for me, that was streaming. even just for one person, even just to myself a lot of the time, turning on the stream, focusing on an experience in front of me, being social, connecting with people, filled me with something that I needed that all the food in the world couldn't replace. And that is reflective of just how much of a role food had in my life before all this started. This was the last piece. This gave me a full day of peace from terrible food decisions, combined with all the lessons I'd learned over the years prior, and paved the way for me to really start dropping the pounds. Thank you, if you've ever watched one of my streams, for contributing to this. In 2023, I have actually found myself in a place where I don't need those streams as much because just getting a year of a break from that terrible habit of filling my evenings with food has sort of trained me off of it. Even on the nights where I don't stream now, I don't eat. I find other things to do. I have given myself a different direction in life that is not involved with solving problems with food. And to be honest with you, before all this, I never imagined that could ever happen. And I'm just so damn grateful. Really, really damned grateful. Last thing, scales have always been my enemy. They've never had anything good to tell me, and as a result, I've always avoided them. But in early 2022, I ordered myself one. I brought one home because I knew I needed to start weighing in. I needed to start tracking my progress. I'd made so many good changes, and the next step was surely accountability and brutal honesty about what was working. That first weigh in, the number horrified me a little bit, but it was a starting point, and I'm proud to say that since then I've lost 88 pounds in almost exactly 1 year. Now, some of you are going to hear that number and think to yourself something along the lines of only 88 pounds? Why not 100, 150, 200 even? Other creators have done it. Well, to put it quite simply, I've done that before. In 2009, I lost 150 pounds by taking heroic measures in my life to make great changes. Great changes that ultimately didn't stick. Over the years, I put all that weight back on and then some to get all the way back to that awful point in the emergency room in 2019 at nearly 600 pounds. I've learned that making great changes in the short term is no guarantor of long term success. And I'm at a point in my life where playing for keeps is the only option on the board. I've gotten serious about only accepting the changes in my life that I can really keep up for the rest of it. And that's why I'm so excited about where I am today. I still weigh 375 pounds as of today, and I still have a lot of work to do. In about 100 more pounds, I'll be at my high school weight, and then we'll just see where things are from there. But I'm not in a rush. I'll get there eventually. Playing for keeps because for me, I have big things I want to do. This weight loss journey, for whatever it's worth, is not the end of a story for me. It is the beginning, the start of an incredible future that I want to build for myself and people I love and anyone else who gives a crap about me. You see, I think the world can be a better place. I think the only way to do that is to first make ourselves better so that we can bring our best gifts to bear. And I'm convinced that my best gifts are still a ways off. I am really excited about this future, and I just can't wait to see you in it.